Hello, and welcome to Real Mindful. This is where we speak mindfully about things that matter. Real Mindful is a twice-monthly conversation with some of the teachers, thinkers, writers, and researchers who are engaged in the mindfulness movement. You'll hear conversations about the science of mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, and the heart of it. And we're so glad you're here. I'm Stephanie Domet. I'm the managing editor at Mindful Magazine and Mindful.org, and this is Real Mindful.
"25 kids who maybe got still and silent for 10 seconds in the first 5 months of the school year, dropped into practice, eyes gently closed, bodies still."
That's J.G. Larochette. He's the founder and director at the Mindful Life Project. Mindful Life Project is a nonprofit J.G. started almost a decade ago to help bring the transformative power of mindfulness and its tools to school kids and school communities. The Mindful Life Project is a charitable partner of this year's Mindful30, our annual 30-day meditation challenge that runs every September. And it's late in September now, but you can still sign up to receive 30 days of mindfulness instruction straight to your inbox from some of our favorite meditation teachers, people like Sharon Salzberg, Barry Boyce, Shalini Ball-Milne, Rashid Hughes, Sarah Ivanhoe, and more. And your subscription to the Mindful30 helps support the Mindful Life Project. And we'll drop a link to both Mindful30 and the Mindful Life Project in our show notes so that you can check both of them out and decide. Now, I had the chance to catch up with J.G. Larochette recently to find out how Mindful Life Project got started and what impact it's had on thousands of lives, including his own. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hello, J.G., and welcome to Real Mindful.
Hello, Stephanie. Thanks for having me today.
J.G., you found mindfulness at a particularly turbulent time in your life. When you cast your mind back, what do you remember about your first few meditation sessions?
Oh, wow. I got chills when you asked that question, Stephanie. A little context. I was a classroom teacher here in Richmond, California. Before that, I was a coach on the playground during recess after school. With amazingly resilient young people, and also systemic issues that led to our kids not having the mental and emotional supports they deserved, as well as me as an educator being burned out. So it was a deep suffering that happened in 2011 after many years of trying to push through being the educator that I wanted my own kids to have, but also being the advocate community voice. So it was many years of pushing, not really finding the pause, not taking care of myself. So in the fall of 2011, in the depths of my anxiety and depression, I tried so many different things, Stephanie, to try to figure out how to be healthier and how to come back to myself, right? I'd lost myself fully. So that first mindful practice, the meditation I did, two that popped to mind here at the Kaiser, which is our healthcare provider. They had a mindfulness course here in Richmond, which I was surprised by in the first place. I felt a sense of belonging, right, in my own experience, and a sense of true freedom from those thoughts and emotions that I thought I was supposed to avoid and neglect, and really a connection to my whole humanity and the welcoming, right? And then over at Spirit Rock with Jack Kornfield on a Monday night talk a couple weeks later, these are my first two mindfulness experiences, and just being like, wait a second, I think I've been avoiding myself for a long time. I think I've abandoned myself time and time again since I was a young person to fit the layers of conditioning and the narratives that were provided. So here, this is me, like I can maybe start falling in love with my true nature. And then I went to Jack and I was like, I want this to go to schools across the country, right? And so I remember this moment in time in December 2011 that I was like, wait, I think everyone deserves this practice, and everyone deserves it because it's already in us. We were born with it. Everything that happens after is where we start abandoning. And it was beyond transformative. I went from deep suffering to liberation within a few weeks in a space that I didn't expect to happen.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful and a quick transition. Your head must have been spinning in some ways.
I mean, I think that the thing that comes up, right, is that when I wasn't, it was already spinning.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I think like what happened was, that as an educator, as a human being, as someone that wanted to always be of service to others. I was 8 years old when I started seeing the injustices in schools here in Berkeley, California, or when I was in indigenous places with my family across the Americas, or beyond in inner city parts of the community I've been in, right? And so I think one of the things that happened for me was that I wanted to be of service, but I also truly felt like this human being that I am doesn't deserve the same thing I'm trying to give others, right? So that wanting to make everyone else's life more enjoyable, more empowering, I wasn't fulfilling for myself. But as an ex-athlete, I can say that sport was my first mindfulness practice growing up. Then I became this educator, and sport was still there, but it was more head kind of overwhelmed, right? And not so much connecting to the body. And stillness for me became my true sanctuary, right? So I think both pieces, right? Like the head was spinning, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't functioning, I was trying to show up to school still without any idea of who I was anymore, just trying to be of service without anything left in my being. So, it's that deep suffering that allowed the crack to open for me to realize that what I've been looking for out externally was already internal.
Right. And so then you're able to like step into this space and step into that pause and kind of tap into your own wisdom and truly, I guess, figure out how to serve the people you want to serve.
100%. I mean, it's pretty, I keep on feeling so humbled, right? We serve 14,000 kids in direct service work with our organization in schools with coaches that are mindfulness-based social emotional learning folks across the Bay Area and beyond now. And I keep on saying the real reason this worked was, first and foremost, for me, I was able to nurture an experience with my emotions, my thoughts, and my lived experience that was compassionate versus critical, that was about welcoming this inner experience as it is without thinking that because I have anxiety rising or fear rising, I'm weak or less than. And then when we translate that to young people, I brought it to my third graders only a few weeks after I took those 2 classes. I brought it to my third graders, said, boys and girls, I don't know if you want to try this out, but I really found a sense of well-being that I've been really looking for. And I was transparent with them. I told them that I was overwhelmed and that I was having anxiety and that I needed to figure things out. And they were beyond compassionate. But they're also concerned, right? They're like, wait a second, you are not the cool, fun guy that we heard in first and second grade we were supposed to have at third grade. And I said, I'm not right now because I'm not fully me. So I brought it to my third graders a couple weeks after I learned it, just to say, I'm going on this journey. Do you want to go on the journey with me? And Stephanie, that moment will forever be etched in my whole mind, body, and spirit, because 25 kids who maybe got still and silent for 10 seconds in the first 5 months of the school year dropped into practice, eyes gently closed, body still, and just I guided breath awareness and sound awareness with very little background, except that this had changed my life in 2 weeks. And that room will forever be in my heart, because every kid eyes were closed. Every kid kept on going. They were supposed to stop after 2 minutes. I rang the bell. I was like, it's time to open your eyes. Not one kid opened their eyes. It was 7 minutes later when they finally were like, looking around, and I asked, tell me what happened. Every kid said something powerful. Every kid. That was the most peaceful I felt. I was the calmest I ever felt. I felt like I was floating. I was like in the clouds. Like, I was like, wait a second. So you also resonated with this practice. For the next 5 months, they were the co-founders of the work. So in our classroom, we created the organization that now serves tens of thousands of people, but it's based off our young people's innate nature, right?
What convinced you that your students would benefit from mindfulness? You have this kind of 2-week turnaround for yourself. What was it in you that saw right away, this is something I should bring to these kids?
That's a great question. I think that first and foremost, I'll fully transparent. I had a 3-year-old at the time and a son on the way, right? And I started really reflecting on what mindfulness had done for me in that short amount of time. Obviously, the scientific side of, letting that stress response lower, let the cortisol and adrenaline drop, all of those physiological sides. But it was like, what was it around my own experience now as a human? And it was really like I'm reconnecting with that powerful, innate, great self, authentic self that I think every kid is when they're born.
Yeah.
And when we have trauma and we have stress and we have systemic issues, social injustices, violence, whatever it might be, that innate, beautiful, authentic nature that we're born with gets covered up. And I'd seen that. And that's what was so hard for me was I didn't have primary trauma. I had secondary trauma. I was watching my young people and the families suffer at the injustice of society and the systemic issues we deal with on a daily basis. And that's what burned me out. So it's like, wait, they just need to keep tapping in. They already know it. Like, we're trying to send them all this curriculum, all these different things, but like, they are who they need to be, but we don't want them to abandon themselves because of the environment. So that was kind of like, I should try it out with them, see what happens. And truly, I didn't expect it to be what it ended up being. I mean, now they just graduated. So those kids now graduate high school this last summer. And just thinking through kind of like that journey that they went on with me and how important it was for each of us at that time. And now how important it is that it wasn't at a time where mindfulness was cool, right? Yeah. Especially because it was getting colonized in a lot of ways, right? With the Lululemon or that kind of stigma of like, this is for white elite, rich people versus like, this is from people of color. This is thousands of years old. And there's ways we can frame it so it's inclusive of every human being beyond any gender, race, creed, language, right? This is us as humans.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Just the intrinsicness of it and the opportunity. I mean, I often think, I look at the young people in my life and I think, like, how can I even tell you all the things that, it can take you decades to come back to yourself, right? To peel back all those layers of conditioning and received ideas and inner critic and all of that stuff. And when I look at a kid, I just think, oh, you don't have any of that on you yet. And like, how can we best equip you to resist that stuff and keep it from accruing to you? And so, mindfulness is one of those tools, right?
100%. I think also that's a great piece that you're saying, because as much as mindfulness for youth is super important, because it's tapping into that innate piece that they haven't abandoned yet or are abandoning but don't need to, the adults often are the reason we abandon ourselves as young people. It could be messages from media. It could be messages from adults at schools. It can be from family members where you're not good enough. You should be this. You have this.
Why aren't you more like your sister?
Exactly. The comparison. And then like, you got anger problems, right? Mm-hmm. Like I always say, especially in the work that we do, like one of the most powerful things is that emotions and thoughts aren't who we are. They're just experiences that are coming and going. But when you label a kid, and I saw this in schools, right? Where it's like a 5-year-old and all of a sudden they're already famous for being the troublemaker or the kid who no one wants to have in their class. And that was the piece that really harmed my experience, is watching adults with trauma or adults with stress and how reactive we can be to a little 5-year-old or 6-year-old, or mind you, a middle or high schooler, right? And those symptoms that we're reacting to are not being uncovered at the root cause. And specifically as adults, what I did in my classroom for 9 years was I built a sense of belonging that I made every kid know, not your grades, not your behaviors, none of that is going to change the way I approach this relationship. It's unconditional care. And if we build that relationship, what happens? Trust, safety, empowerment. And so I saw it happen in my class, but what I didn't do is I didn't do that for myself, right? And so that's why I believe that mindfulness, beyond, as we know, it could be a global transformation tool at a scale that we haven't seen yet. But I think an education is key, because our education system really forces that stress response and this conditioning of, you have to be this as a school staff member, you have to be this as a student. I couldn't read until 3rd grade very well, and I became a 3rd grade teacher. I always told that to my kids. We all have different needs, right? We all learn at different times, and we all have skills that are amazing in different ways. But especially in our education system right now, it's become more and more the tester, teaching a test taker, right? Not a learner, not a person who's curious about the world, not curious about themselves. So I think that the combination of the root problems we have with what we can do from a place of mindfulness, compassion, and daily practice of community, right? This is a relational practice. This isn't I think everyone keeps saying, oh, it's great for you individually. Well, no. Mindfulness is great individually only because it also makes us more healthy as a community. It's relational. So it's not an individual thing. Nothing in life is, right?
So what did you see in the community of your classroom when you introduced this mindfulness to your students? What kinds of changes did you start to observe?
First, it goes back to me, right? So because I had anxiety, because I had, depression symptoms, and I was in this experience of avoidance of it, my capacity to be fully present was not there for them. So for those 4 or 5 months in the fall where I was in turmoil, they were reflecting a couple things. They're reflecting me not being mentally and emotionally present. Physically, I was kind of on most days, but also reflecting that their world was also that, right? So many of, if you have shootings in the neighborhood or you have family challenges, right? There's maybe no sanctuary for ourselves to be present with who we are, refuge in that. So I think the biggest thing that happened was first, like they saw me and they saw me grounded in my identity of who I am and who I want to be. They reflected that pretty quickly. Then when we started practicing, it was like, just like this whole, I would just say pathway of just open, infinite field of possibilities, where we said, all right, what does a classroom, a school, what does education really need to look like for your needs to be met? And then mindfulness gave us all that capacity to see, like you said, unravel those layers to like say, oh, we need mindfulness in the morning. We need compassion in the afternoon. We need transitions to be mindful sits because it can be stressful from going from math to reading, or after recess when we've had troubles in the playground. We need these, but we also need ways to let out our emotions in healthy ways. And so we started practicing mindfulness. It was like, yes, that's the GPS system to live this internal experience in a skillful, loving, compassionate way. But now, how do we also release some of these traumas, sufferings, and stress? And so it was expressive arts, it was yoga and movement, it was performing arts. So we started to create these modalities because mindfulness gave us that clarity of what we wanted to create as a class, but more even bigger than that as a society. They told me at the end of the next 4 months of piloting, like, we love you as a teacher, but you got to get out of this classroom and teach mindfulness and do this programming around our community. And that's kind of what happened.
These third graders gave you that mandate.
Just 8 or 9 year olds. They're like, you know what? Remember that 5th grader that was at the neighboring school? They broke into our class and stole our laptops. We should have mindfulness there for them because they aren't a problem. They just have a lot of stress. They have a lot of things probably happening. They probably didn't want to do that. So it was very, very much about ownership of like, hey, what do we do to change not just our lives in that classroom at Fortin Elementary School in room 18, but what does it mean in South Richmond? What does it mean in our neighboring streets? What does it mean for our rivals, right? Like they didn't have any reason to be like, that school should have mindfulness because their experience is like, those are rival schools. We don't want to be around them, right? More than this practice, mindfulness was owned. And I would say that's kind of the long-winded answer. A deep ownership of the practice, a deep engagement and relevance, a continuation of knowing that this is a path that they can explore on their own, at home, on the park, and also authenticity, like they were just in it.
Now, how long had you been teaching at this point?
Yes, I was a Playworks coach, was a nonprofit. It's based out of the Bay Area, but now a national nonprofit where we organize recess games, run the PE program because a lot of schools cut PE and the arts. So we run PE program, after school program. I did that for 2 years in Oakland and then Richmond at the school that then I saw 5 miles from where I was born and raised, the systemic problems and the systemic inequities at a level that was traumatizing and overwhelming. I saw my kids on the playground really shift with the culture of like inclusion and empowerment. I thought, well, what would you do for the classroom learning experience? Because they didn't want to go back to class. So I was like, let me be a teacher. So that was from 2004 to 2012, 8 years of teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in the community. And also trying to be an advocate, a rallier for the families and advocate to make sure our schools are equitable.
So you already knew, I mean, little kids are awesome. I teach little kids too. I teach them creative writing, lots of 9-year-olds. And I mean, they're just incredible. They're dialed in. They know what time it is. They don't have so many of the hangups that my adult students have, for instance. So you already knew the kind of like power and potential of 8 and 9-year-olds. But when they were, really getting it and really saying like that school, those 5th graders who broke in, they weren't saying they need to be grounded or they need to go to detention. They were saying they need this transformative practice too. Did that kind of blow your mind that the kids
100%, 100%. I mean, first it did, but then like one of the things that we embed, and I think this is so important, that gave me the spaciousness to see that my suffering wasn't me, was the science of stress and trauma, how it affects our behaviors, how that shows up in our lives. And so they were able to see that they were all up in their amygdala. They had flipped their lids, right? Like their prefrontal cortex was not working. If they went and broke into a classroom as a 10 or 11-year-old, they said that that isn't what they really wanted to do. And so when the police found the laptop, right, and asked me, I went to the students, I said, what do you think? What should we do here? And they said right away, do not press charges, right? Like, they deserve to get the support. This is probably because adults in their lives are not well. So it blew my mind, but also didn't, because I think we talked about this, right? Our inner strength as humans is we might be wired for survival in the brain, but we're wired for love in the heart. And that's what young people show, right? That magic of being that you said. And unfortunately, we got to do better as societies, because they usually are abandoning that too soon because of all the chaos around them, right? But that was kind of the opening of like, oh, let's actually work with the kids who need the most support in schools in our Rise Up program, which was created by the students, where we pull kids out of their class for 45 minutes twice a week, teaching mindfulness, expressive arts, movement, and performing arts to engage that person in really owning it, and then being able to engage in healthy ways with the rest of their school. So that was our flagship program, and it was mixed up of students who were struggling with behaviors due to trauma and kids who are thriving socially and academically, because oftentimes those two populations are told they shouldn't be around each other.
That's right.
Either explicitly or implicitly. So I was like, okay, what do we do? And I remember students saying, well, I sit quietly in class while other kids are misbehaving, they get all the attention. So I was like, well, what do we do to change that? Well, we should create groups with both sides to build compassionate communities. So that was our first program. And then quickly, a few months after that, in 3 schools, it was like, did you see how stressed out teachers are? Did you see how kids that don't have mindfulness are maybe engaging in unhealthy ways with those other students that are coming back from groups? And then it was our second program, Mindful Community, that we created because of that, where every kid on a school campus once a week with their teacher in the room get our mindfulness-based social emotional learning from us teaching it and coaching it. So I think that's kind of like the pathway of community change, was really innately that they already knew the answers.
And was it as readily accepted by the larger school community? It sounds like the kids were on board, easy, like a slam dunk. But what about the larger school community, the administrators, the parents, and all that?
So parents were 100% behind. I remember I didn't expect it, but I was like, wow, like parents are engaging. And I think I built trust and relationship with parents that was there. The school district's a different story. I actually, in 2012, in that May 2012 timeframe, where my students and myself decided this has to go beyond the 4 walls of this classroom, I went to the school district and said, don't pay me anything else. Keep me as a teacher's salary, and I'll be a mindfulness instructor for a few schools in our community that most need it. Oh, that was a quick no. No. And I was like, so I'm being forced to start a nonprofit, I guess. I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about organizational development. I don't have any funding. Like, what's happening? But that was kind of the push that helped create Mindful Life Project, the students' voices, my family support, and my own innate knowing, deep knowing that this had to happen. And now that we have 45 staff, serving so many students, it's kind of wild to think back to like, I was just a teacher. Right. And all I wanted to do was get the same salary, which was very low as here in California, especially in our district. Get paid very low compared to other districts across California. But it didn't work out. And I guess that was a blessing.
Yeah, it worked out in this much larger way. And so, like, how do you teach mindfulness to kids? Like, what's the gold standard for that? I assume in the beginning you were just doing like a basic version of what you'd been taught.
Totally. So I'd been originally, in the first couple of months, I was taking these classes I've been taking and making them kid appropriate, right? Really trying to get them to engage, bring the relevance to them, because if kids don't have relevance, it's like, why are we doing this? And as an educator, like, if you don't know the why are you even saying it as an adult? And then that connection of like ownership. And so that was the beginning. Then I was lucky with Mindful Schools, which was just down the road. Megan Cowan and Christina Costello both took me on and said, hey, we hear that you're doing this. We hear you need support. I asked them for a job and they're like, well, unfortunately, we're moving towards train the trainer model. And also your district said no to us. So we got to know, you got to know. But they were able to really support me and understand, like, I can do some things. I can use some of their curriculum originally. So for the first 6 months, we were using a little Mindful Schools curriculum. We're using some of our curriculum, trying to navigate student voice. And that's really what happened for the next years. We started getting student feedback. We looked at age appropriateness. We looked at cultural relevant pedagogy, right? How do we make sure that our young people are connecting with these lessons in the way that they really connect beyond just the lesson? So now over the last 8 years after that, we are just continually evolving our 3 main curriculums. So we have a TK through 2nd grade curriculum called the Brain House, which basically has literally a poster and lessons that go with an upstairs brain, which would be our prefrontal cortex, breathing Bruno, listening Leslie, name it Nairi, body scanning Sammy, represented by these stuffed animals, of course, very much TK through 2nd grade. And then downstairs friends are our angry Rex, sad Selena, nervous Nasir, and they get to know that they both belong. And then they get their mindful sits with their upstairs friends, and they start creating kind of the way to live it, both in the stillness, but then outside of, like, when we're in our experience. And then we have an upper grade curriculum, 3rd through 5th grade, which is then getting deeper practice, more relational practice, because until you're 8 years old, the world revolves around you. But at 8 years old, you start noticing that your being is also intertwined in others. And so that we have that up curriculum that's much more deep, kind of relational and stillness practice. And then our middle school curriculum. And we never stop, right? Our curriculum is ever evolving. We never think we're going to be done with it because lived experiences change, right? Right now, in the pandemic, we can't just use exact same lessons. We had to adapt and change our lessons to meet the relevant point of our lives. And that's, for us in mindfulness, is so key that we can come in with lessons. But what's really important as mindfulness practitioners and coaches for young people is that we really use what's actually there, right? Which can be sounds, it can be emotions, it can be thoughts, it can be toxicity of the school culture or something happened in the neighborhood. So how do we connect these practices in a way that young people are going to use it? And it's been amazing to watch how they bring it home to their families, how, after recess or after school, we see kids in their mindful sits because they were trying to resolve conflict together, right? So the ownership.
What do you mean, like, they are organizing themselves into little mindfulness moments?
Oh, most definitely.
Oh, frequently. Come on, tell me about that.
I mean, from 5-year-olds, it's amazing. I mean, we've had from all ages, right? I can think of one time that was recent, before the pandemic, because we're just going back to in-person learning here in California, but that there was a conflict on the playground by 6-year-olds. 3 kids who'd been getting quite a bit of challenging situations on the playground, had a conflict, and the teacher saw them down, the way, but they didn't see her. And next thing she saw them was talking about something and then sitting on the playground structure. And when she came a little closer, she saw that their eyes were closed.
Oh, come on.
And she was like, are they doing a mindful sit right now? And that's exactly what happened. They talked it out. Teacher didn't engage at all, just stayed back. And next thing she knew, their relationships were so much better moving forward. And there were 3 kids who were having a lot of toxicity, and they kept on practicing. And so we talked to them in our small group work. We talked to them in whole class. We showed, like, that is the change. And we see that pretty often. We had another kid in another school that was, like, creating mindfulness club at the garden of the school during lunch. If you have any issues, I have some nice mindful sits for you. This is a 4th grader, right? I have some nice mindful sits for you, and I even have some beautiful nature to share with you. So this kid, and this is, like, in a community where there is violence on a daily basis, where usually outdoors can be unsafe, in at least in the feeling. They just constantly have this mindfulness club. Kids will come in when they want to. They're having challenges, they join. He'll put a rock or 2 in their hands to feel grounded, right? And next thing, and this is all, like, a lot of what we do is just be conduits for young people to really own it and kind of share the path. And so our programs are always about that.
Yeah. And what do you make of that, of the way they take it on and make it their own in that way?
First and foremost, that is who we are authentically, right? That we are social beings, that we care about each other, that kids are connected to compassion and empathy, that they can get hardened because maybe the compassion and empathy hasn't been shined on them. But when they get it shined on them and given the skill sets and community of practice, they will flourish. And I would say the second part of it is adults getting out of the way, right? Like, right, I think that's key for us in education. We often try to solve the problems for our young people. Or as a parent, I try to solve the problems for my kids.
Sure.
I can offer guidance. I can be inviting of what I think about it. But at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones that choose the path. And we can just offer the different paths. And that's what we're all about. I have a story, one more story, of a kid who was getting suspended from school every day when he was on the playground. This was September, quite a few years back when we started the organization. And what I kept on telling the kids when I was teaching and my teammates was like, hey, we just want you to have the power to choose. We want you to choose your response, not automatically react. And mindfulness allows us both the physiological side of creating that space and time, the reduction of cortisol and adrenaline that often makes us react and other stress hormones, but it also provides us that stillness space. We can choose how we engage or don't engage. And this kid was fighting often because of very little reasons. A kid took a ball from me. The kid looked at me funny, right? Things that triggered a stress response into going into fight, flight, freeze. And obviously it was fight. First thing you do is throw punches. So the principal's like, I don't know what to do. Can you support? He was in our Rise Up group. It had only been a month or two that we started at that school in a small group work. And so I go out of the playground and I see him get the ball taken out of his hands from the side. If I was a referee, maybe not a foul, right? Like maybe it wasn't a foul, but he goes and he's just ready to punch the kid, clenches his fist. And so I yell his name. I say, come on over here. And he looks at me. He's like, I'm going to beat him up. I get it. Come here first though. Right? And he's like looking at me because I'm smiling. And he's like, I'm about to hit this kid. Why are you smiling? So I think that triggered a curiosity, right? And he comes over and I said, what does mindfulness mean? He's like, pay attention to the present moment without judgment. All right, cool. You got definition. Now, what mindful skills have you been using? Oh, I got body, scan, breathing. I'm like, yeah. So where do you feel anger first in your body? It's like right away he goes fists. Like, awesome. So do you like to fight? Yeah, if they mess with me, I like to fight. No, but do you really like to fight? Yeah, because I got to protect myself. Do you like going home and be suspended? No, it's super boring. My mom doesn't let me play video games. All right. Do you like to fight? Not really. I don't like it, but I feel like I have to. I said, well, I want you to choose if you punch or not. That's all I want for you. I want you to have that choice. And we figured out, first thing to do is check your fists. Once they're tightening, notice the tightening. Don't need to do anything, just notice it. That is enough space to choose. I'm going to give you a secret code with your teacher. So the teacher sees you amped up in your emotions. She'll give you a little hand signal so you can check your fist and take a deep breath in, maybe name the emotion that's arising, be with the breath for a second, use sounds, whatever you need to engage. So he didn't fight for 6 to 8 weeks, which is amazing, right? Great. And then get a call saying, oh, you need to come here. He's going to be suspended. And so I run to the playground. I drive over. I have to get over about a mile away. I drive over and he looks at me with the same smile, Stephanie, that I'd given him. I said, why'd you, I realized right away, I was like, sorry, what's happening? What happened? It's like, so you're going to love this. I chose to punch. And I'm like laughing now. I shouldn't be laughing. I'm like, okay, there must be more to the story. He's like, there is, but this is what happened. So 3 upper 6th graders, I'm a 5th grader, cornered me in the corner near the portables. There were no adults. They put me on the ground. And so I'm calling for help. No one's coming. So that was my first choice. I chose to yell for help. No one came. Second thing I did was yelled at them to stop. They still didn't stop. So for a third thing I did was flail my arms around to get space. And I hit some kids on those flails and I ran to the office. But they got to the office first and told the principal that I'd hit them. I was like, gotcha. So you chose because you're your last resort. And that's the lesson I wanted for you. He's now 20 years old. He moved across to Indiana all the way from Richmond, California. But he called me up and we're still in communication. He said, mindfulness was that practice that helped me not get engaged in gang life, not get engaged in gun violence. And it was really, and it was a rough middle school and high school experience for me. But that's that freedom of choice that he had been looking for and yearning for. And then he had kept control over his destiny, right?
For you, as someone who's oriented to service, what does it mean to you to hear from that 19 or 20-year-old that message?
That's the best thing, right? There's nothing better. And we also have we have about 5 of our staff that are former students of ours, right? So we're getting to the point, that it's a cycle, right? And it's just a beautiful thing for young people to be able to know that this practice was theirs. We didn't give it to them. They had it. They just need to be tapped into, and now they can use it for a career or use it for life, success. So there's nothing better. I love the phone calls, the emails, the text messages I get from young people that we're a part of the journey, because they are the journey.
That original 3rd grade class, you said they're graduating from high school now?
They did. They just graduated. Yeah.
Yeah. What can you tell me about them now?
It's a beautiful thing, because I just look back and they're all I've been lucky enough. I think there's only a few that I haven't heard from recently, but they're all looking happy and healthy, right? They seem to have had a journey that was different than the classrooms I had before, to a certain extent, and they're all really achieving, right? Their own visions, their own dreams. I just wish I could stay in touch with them more. That's that educator in me, was I just want to be around them still. And I want, but a few of them are in our organization too. So they are in many ways, but yeah, it's been fun to watch just kind of how they've developed, and will always, and I say this then when I do see them or I'm messaging with them, they will always hold a transformative place in my life, and are the biggest teachers and learners I've ever experienced with. And for that, I'll always be grateful.
I'll ask you one last thing before I let you go. And you alluded to this earlier about, this return to in-person school. It's happening where you are, it's happening where I am. And so everywhere, lots of kids are going back into school buildings for the first time this month. And they and the people around them are likely feeling a lot of anxiety related to that. So I'm wondering, what you would offer into that space, what you want them to know.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. Whew. Yeah, we've been on campuses for the last few weeks. Heartfulness and compassion to every single person, kid, adult. A year and a half, at least here in California, where we had virtual learning, is hard, especially for our young people who are underserved, under-resourced, and have systemic oppression and inequalities and inequities in the education system. I think we know that the foundation of a healthy individual and community is mental and emotional well-being. My hope and deep desire is that we as adults and as systems and education, that we finally put that as a priority. Nothing matters more than mental and emotional well-being and physical well-being. Anything else after that will happen. If it's academic outcomes, if it's success, whatever it is. So I wish everyone the practice. I think that, I say it like this. A lot of people are like, well, mindfulness doesn't fit everyone. I'm like, to me, that's like saying exercise doesn't fit everyone, right? Like taking a walk isn't good for everyone. Or if you can't walk, using your upper body to move. If you can't do that, using your, just like everyone needs some investment in our physical well-being. And mental well-being, we know gratitude, mindfulness, compassion work, that is where we can fundamentally say exercise is to physical health as mental training, mental and emotional training is to our emotional well-being. So I think it's a time where the stress response is strong. People are overwhelmed. Emotions, I would say that's the most important. Knowing that no emotion is wrong. Knowing that no thought is wrong. And that we aren't our thoughts and our emotions. The more we observe them, see them as they are, welcome them, care for them, bring that unconditional love and care we might have some for someone else to ourselves, the healthier we'll be. And I wish that upon everyone, because I was tormented by emotions and thoughts when I thought I couldn't have them. So I wish everyone welcoming of those emotions.
JG Larochette, it has been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for this.
Stephanie, pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me today. Such an honor.
That is JG Larochette of the Mindful Life Project. If you're thinking about getting started with mindfulness or deepening your practice, our Mindful30 provides a great framework for developing or deepening a practice, and you can sign up anytime in the month of September. Do some good in your own life and for the Mindful Life Project as well. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of Real Mindful, and I hope you did, perhaps you would consider leaving us a review. You can do that wherever you found this podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening from. And listen, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what you thought of what you heard on the podcast today. You could suggest a topic or guest for a future episode. You can drop us a line at yourwords@mindful.org. And as you continue along your mindfulness journey, you might enjoy subscribing to 12-Minute Meditation. That's our weekly podcast that offers fresh, guided meditations each week to help you find your way to your practice. It turns out neuroscientific research reveals that 12 minutes of meditation a day can be enough to yield benefits like increased focus, clarity, calm, and compassion. And I don't know about you, but I could use more of all of that in my day. So you can subscribe to 12-Minute Meditation wherever fine podcasts are found. We will be back with another episode of Real Mindful in October. Until then, don't forget to choose your punches.